Hello, kindred longevity lifestyle designers. This is Govin here, secretsoflongevity.com. We have another question here from a recent video, and it's from the user LovelyTD3xD or 3XD, and they're asking, I am currently 18, broke, and I live with my parents. It is really hard to avoid all these toxic chemicals and foods because my parents seem to not care about their health or their children's health. I try to give them some insight to using natural alternatives and getting healthier foods, but they just don't seem to care, and I feel like this lifestyle is affecting me in a negative way. Any tips? Absolutely. This is very similar to a question I got about 4 years ago, asking about how someone can eat more cheaply while at college or university, and I'll kind of recap some of the stuff I talked about in that, although you're asking specifically about living at home, not away at school, but either way, you have some independence at the point in your life where I'm assuming you might have some extra income from a job. And actually 18 is great if you're not at college because you have that extra income without having, I'm assuming, to pay a lot in terms of expenses. So yes, you're still going to be having family meals, but if you have that extra income, look at purchasing stuff yourself. And that's a good way to get yourself ready to move out. Now, actually, just looking back at your comment, you did say broke. So I guess I'd first say, why are you broke? You don't, as far as I know, unless you're paying massive amount of rent to your parents. Hopefully they give you a better deal than what you'd get if you were living away. But yeah, look at getting your financial situation under your own control and getting prosperity first. And that gives you the flexibility to be able to tailor your life to the way you want it. So if you don't have the money and you're reliant on something, I mean, the same thing would apply if someone was homeless. If you're eating unhealthy because you have to rely on food banks and all they have is like Campbell's soup and Kraft Dinner, the steps to getting healthier aren't so much about what you can do to be healthier in terms of your diet. It's about what can you do to get into a position where you have the financial freedom to be able to afford things that are healthier. Now, if it takes time to build up that extra money, whether you're at school and you have a lot on your plate, so you probably can't work necessarily a lot of extra hours, but it doesn't take a lot to just do a couple little things. So just like anyone that was making a video telling how someone in their younger years how to consume a vegetarian or vegan diet with family that aren't supportive in that way, you can do things like say, can you cook this separately without the meat and add your meat afterwards and I'll add my tofu or whatever. I'm not recommending people do that. That's not a healthy way of being vegetarian in my opinion. But there's ways you can work around it by starting to get some of your own ingredients, maybe some of the most major ones, the ones that have the most pesticides and herbicides on them. You can look up lists online of what foods contain the most things like that. So for instance, if you consume meat, that would be the first thing you go to because that tends to bioaccumulate a lot of toxins and it has, in many cases, hormones added to them, as well as eggs. Eggs is a really simple thing because you probably maybe eat some meals on your own at this point. You make your own breakfast. You can get your own eggs and have them separate in the fridge. So same thing with animal foods. You say, can you cook this or some of what you're making for dinner tonight separately, and I'm going to cook up my own side meat and I'm going to add it and we're all going to be eating the same thing. I'm just going to have my own organic or free range grass-fed meat that I add myself. Another thing you can look at is to start wild foraging plants. So I did talk about this in the video from a while back, and I said you can begin to get familiar with the really basic wild greens that are edible to make your own salads or to whip up in smoothies. So actually smoothies is a very easy way to do your own meals that are separate. You definitely probably want to have some family meals together, but instead of relying on your parents perhaps for lunch, you just make your own smoothie with various berries or things in it. And I'm sure there'd be some things your parents might be willing to buy you that you use that isn't necessarily for the whole family to use, maybe some frozen berries and things like that. But you throw in some greens if you don't like the taste of them. Like a wild green salad is pretty intense to eat. Like dandelions, plantain, and these other things, that's a really difficult salad to eat. Although you can mix it in with other greens and it's not as intense when you have the more neutral flavors of the lettuce. But that's one strategy. You throw those greens into a smoothie with better tasting stuff, and you can get that down. You can be healthier. The greens are very detoxifying if you are consuming some other foods that might still have the pesticides and stuff on them from what your parents are making. So one thing that's probably very futile, which you've already kind of alluded on, is trying to convince them of anything. One thing you might be able to convince them of is getting a couple things for you that are separate that you then use. But yeah, you're not going to be able to convert your whole family onto a totally brand new way of doing things. This is what everyone finds at a younger age. I had the same thing when I wanted to be vegetarian and vegan when I was still living at home. And it's the same thing you see in various YouTube videos of either people vlogging about their experiences living at home and trying to do a healthier lifestyle, or other health coaches and teachers answering questions specifically about this. It's a really common thing, actually. And yeah, it is difficult, but you have to start with the stuff you can do yourself. Another thing is getting your own spring water. If your parents are buying bottled plastic water, get the big plastic bottles because you don't want to be carrying glass around. Maybe get glass carboys that you transfer them into at home, but especially if you're younger, you don't want to be carrying those massive ones around unless you happen to be very strong. You fill up the jugs at a local spring, and you can go to findaspring.com to get a location on one near you. You bring the jugs home, pour them into the glass carboys, and you drink that instead of the plastic bottled water, which has those xenoestrogens leaching into the water, and that's probably one of the worst things we can be consuming. I'd say that's plastic bottled water is probably worse than consuming pesticide-laden foods. Then, of course, you also have factors that are outside of just diet. So you have the effect of things to whatever degree you're able to manage that. Perhaps some of the things I've already talked about can cut down, if not completely eliminate, the need to consume the things they're consuming and bring home. But if you are still having some of that, really focus on other aspects of health to cultivate these practices so it kind of offsets whatever negative effects you have from that. So exercise, build up a really good exercise regime, whatever you're drawn to most. Get into any kind of thing that gets you sweating, get sunshine. Doing the water thing, like I mentioned, is really good. So cover all the bases that you do have control over. And the other thing that's great for is when you do get to the point where you move out, you're going to have a lot of these habits built up, and it's very easy for you to remain healthy when you're doing those first few months and years on your own, whether it is at university or college or at your own place. That's when a lot of people start to get unhealthy. A lot of people in university, college, they start putting on weight because it's their first time away from home. They're eating from the school cafeteria, so they're going for all the junkiest stuff perhaps, or just through the stress of school, they go to the junkiest stuff as a way of dealing with the stress within their bodies, and they fall out of any habits they might have had, whether it's exercise related or not. But if you really focus on building the stronger foundations on the things that you do have control over, that can carry on into any transition you're going to make at this point in your life. So I really hope this was as in-depth as it could be. Let me know what you think in the comments below, whether this was helpful or not, and I'll talk to you again soon. Take care and embrace life without limits.